everybody. Russ and My Hammers 11. Hope you're all safe and well. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, hitting the bell icon so you're made aware if we have any time to put new content on. Obviously, we've got all the charity stuff coming up. Let's talk about charity, mate. Charity, that was like Harry Enfield. God, where that came from. God, dear. We've got obviously the live event on Thursday with Jim's already laughing. We've got the live event on Thursday. Seamless. And so that's going to be good. We want to raise £10,000 to Iron Support Your Food Bank. We've got obviously Isla Fights, the My Hammers 11 prints produced by Steve Kurger. 25% of all of them go to Isla as well. So that's all the charity stuff done. Looking forward to that. Loads of great guests. Loads are coming for the next few weeks, including today's guest, another one from the Stop Hammer Time list of recommendations. So no pressure. It's Jim Kearns. How you doing, Jim? How's things with you, man?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me. And given the kind of long and illustrious list of people who preceded me, I hope I can somewhat live up to the names that have gone before me. It's a pleasure.
Well, I mean, you know, such greats as Chesney Hawkes. You know, I mean, you know. Yeah. So, you know, Chesney Hawkes and, you know, so obviously Phil and Jim, and we've had a few of the old originals. We had obviously Pete May, Pete Ward. So yeah, you're just in the next of a long line. But actually, you're probably the youngest one of that bunch, I think, in terms of the ones that Phil gave me.
Yes, quite right. Yes, yeah, I'm several decades younger than all of them. Yeah, that's a good point. Well made.
Exactly,
and one I will be making to Phil next time I see him.
Totally agree that. How's things with you, Jim, at the moment in terms of, you know, obviously, you know, this new world, new normal we live in at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I was saying to you before, I'm somewhat reluctant to talk about how much I'm enjoying lockdown because you know, it isn't that way for everyone. And actually, I mean, I did have the virus quite on early on in lockdown. I spent 3 weeks in bed as a result of the virus, as opposed to just sort of, you know, taking to the bed.
Yeah, taking time off. Yeah,
which I've also been known to do. But subsequent to then, I'm very fortunate. I can work from home. I have, you know, an office at home that I'm able to kind of lock myself away and during the day and work. So I've been very fortunate. And whilst I kind of appreciate it hasn't been this way for everyone, actually for me, spending a bit more time at home and a bit less time on the central line has actually been quite a nice feeling, to be honest.
It's so true, and it's quite good in the old wallet as well, isn't it? To be honest, I'm not being funny. It's like
it is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we used to do our company. We had to take a sort of deferral to make sure everyone had enough money in the kitty and stuff. And I was probably spending that on the train, really. Right, yeah. And so, you know, it's like, well, I didn't really see much difference. And also, you don't have to spend, you know, your £3 meal deal at Sainsbury's. Oh, I'm so, you know, how the mighty live. But you know what I mean? Yeah. So it makes a big difference. It really does.
Well, I think really between that and then, you know, in the first period of lockdown, obviously there was no football. So there was none of the additional stress or agony of watching us play, which also meant that the first few weeks was like a summer holiday. You know, there was, you know, the weekends would come. You wouldn't have to worry about skipping match of the day or finding an excuse not to watch it. So it was quite pleasurable. And actually, I think, you know, the reason that this show is so interesting and has been so successful is that I think looking back is always, you know, in recent times has been a lot more fun than what we're actually experiencing. So I think that kind of nostalgic element is actually quite enjoyable.
Exactly, I totally agree, and I mean that's why we started the channel, because I was the same as you, a little bit bored. I was sort of a little bit twiddling my thumbs a bit, and yeah, you had the first sort of few weeks of lockdown, and you sort of get through your Netflix box sets and things like that, but then, you know, they just started to get more and more romantic comedy-y. Do you know what I mean? The selections, the wife were like more reality TV, a lot of Australian ones. You know, they're watching one now, Australia's Married at First Sight. It's like, I don't know. So yeah, it just means that at least for an hour. Exactly. Yeah, whatever, Jim. On series. I know it's on Series Link. But it just gives me an hour away. It gives me an hour away where they can watch their crap, and I come back and I'm trying to educate them. I got them into Homeland the other week, which you know, because, you know, they watch. What did she watch the other day? Designated Survivor. Have you seen that one on Netflix?
I've seen it pop up on Netflix.
Kiefer Sutherland, yeah. I didn't think, but she smashed that in 3 days, and then And I said, well, do Homeland, because it's like 7 series or 8 series, and you can last at least a week. But we'll see what happens with that one. But you're right, not having the stress of West Ham for 100 days, not having to look at a league table or read a transfer rumour. It was nice. It was nice. You could just watch all the footballers on Instagram kicking a football outside their apartment, in Canary Wharf, and it was lovely. And then they came back, and it was business as usual. Wolves came in, and it's like, okay.
Well, I think there was definitely a period of being like Schrodinger's football fan, where they couldn't be bad and they couldn't be good, and they were both relegated and staying up at the same time. And so that was all. There was something to be said for the kind of in perpetuity of every single week just remaining constantly where we were in the table with nothing else happening. I mean, there was a kind of an element of escapism of well, eventually, it might come back, but we can probably just pretend that it's never going to happen, and West Ham will therefore remain where they are. But to be fair, actually, I agree with you on the Wolves game. That was fairly disappointing, and the Spurs game that followed it was possibly more disappointing. But actually, all things considered, I thought that Moyes did a pretty good job.
Yeah, he's done it twice. He's been picked up twice to do the same job, and he's done it. So and I've still got I don't know why. I mean, I always have blind optimism every off season, and I lost it a little bit about 1 minute past 9 on Thursday last week, whenever it was, when the fixtures list came out. But now I'm back on it again, because I was talking to someone about the Slaven Bilic season, where we started with, we had Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City, all in the first few games, and we did all right. And I'm confident. I think I'm there at least until about half time at the Newcastle game. and then I'll be like, oh, fucking hell.
Well, I can tell you now that no West Ham fan has ever turned to me for optimism. So I'm afraid, going to be able to, to pump more air into
to match. But yes.
God bless you for your optimism, because if it wasn't for people like you, it would be full of people like me, and we'd all be with our heads in our hands.
It's just yin and yang. It's yin and yang, isn't it, Jim? It's like, you have one hand giveth, the other taketh away. But I mean, if it wasn't, if it didn't have people half glass full, then then there would be no full glass at all. So, but I know what you mean. It's we've been a bit hardened, and a lot of people are just another season. But I wouldn't mind a boring season this year. Do you know what I mean? Like a Kirbishley season or something like that. Just get 11th or 12th and be safe by about January, February time. I'll be all right. I think, this year.
They seem like halcyon days to me. Now, they seem like relatively glorious periods.
We'd have DVDs from, really, based on our success since we've been,
3 successive draws, releasing a DVD. I 100% would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I think the fixtures are difficult, but I have faith in Moyes, and I think I'm in the minority in that sense, but. I think him having a pre-season, albeit one that's a bit curtailed, and we appear not to have any money at all. So, he might have to kind of do more with what he has. But I don't know. I think he's experienced, and I just feel like what the club actually needs is a bit of boring stability, which I think is what you're talking about. And a 3 or 4 year period of not being in a relegation battle would actually be sensational. So I'm with you. 12th I would be delighted.
Yeah, well, especially because I mean, we've got the pre-seasons. I think they kick off tomorrow. We've got by the time this comes out, the first 2 games would have happened, because they're both at the same time, aren't they?
That's right.
So they're splitting the team. There's social distancing and all that, but it's like having 2 teams in different counties is quite impressive. But and then they come up quite fast. And obviously we've got Brentford, haven't we, at home? Then we've got obviously Betway. Got to the final of the Betway Cup again. No one picks up on that. No one picks up on that. Every year we don't always win. Obviously, we've got Bournemouth, so probably lose that one. And then Newcastle. Yeah, so it's like it's going to come really, really quickly. It hasn't seemed sort of 4 or 5 weeks. And I'm the same as you. I think Moyes in our situation, I think he's actually probably the best manager for the job because, he didn't spend a lot of money at Everton, and everyone always mentions that as like his CV, he's sort of, when you're writing your CV, your first 3 lines at the top, about what you're really good at. It was always about Everton. So, and I think, bringing Stuart Pearson and Kevin Nolan, in the squad, I would not want to be a fancy Dan coming off half time, not performing.
No. I mean, I think as well, you have to consider who would realistically come, and I think it's, we all might say, well, we'd love Julian Nagelsmann or whatever, but that's not realistic. And even people like Eddie Howe, who might, or people of his ilk, are they really kind of going to deliver anything more or different than what Moyes is? Maybe there is a natural cap actually on what a team like us can realistically achieve without a kind of a massive restructuring of an awful lot of things about the club, and probably a massive restructuring of Premier League football, which redistributes the money more evenly around the league. I mean, without that, actually, teams like us are forever going to be in a certain sort of bit of the league.
Yeah, we're in a certain level, aren't we? And I think the trouble was, I think, and it's retrospectively looking at things, hindsight's brilliant, but the whole thing around, I think Pellegrini, it was almost like, when people, it's almost like he built this really nice apartment, but it was on really, really crap foundations, and so it just crumbled. And it's like, yeah, exactly. And now it seems that Moyes is the type of like labourer who's going to put these foundations in, which seems like in terms of coaching and the coaching staff and the scouting network and all these stuff, which Pellegrini just had on bits of Post-it notes, apparently, all over the place. I just think he's more. I think he's just more workman-like. He's got this sort of hardened, might just be, but also I like people who, what I like about Moyes is, he's not afraid to wear a tracksuit. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't like managers who are prim and proper all the time. I like ones who could slum it and wear a tracksuit if they're playing Bournemouth or something like that. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think the analogy is probably quite a good one, actually. I mean, that I often think that quite a lot of the successes of the Bilic that first season were actually built on foundations laid by Allardyce, who I was not a fan of at all, and it wasn't wasn't particularly enamoured of the way that he played football. But Allardyce went and left a fully functioning back 4, and then Bilic had some better players, and they put them on top of it. Similarly, we're working in reverse now, which is that Pellegrini's left quite a lot of good attacking players, but almost zero defensive base as far as I can see. So I think Moyes is trying to lay some foundations, and frankly, it's not glamorous and it isn't sexy, and fans don't pay their season tickets to because they don't pay their money for season tickets in response to the notion that the fullbacks might position themselves a bit better going forward. But unfortunately, if you want to finish 12th in the Premier League, your fullbacks do probably need to know where to go, true. Occasionally. So I'm all for a bit of unsexy scrapping.
I just think we should be a bit nastier. Do you know what I mean? We've always been a bit of particularly Pellegrini was a bit of a soft touch, I thought. And it seems like particularly with, even like classic is the corners. Now we're nasty in corners. Antonio and I was talking to someone else the other day about it, about the effects of Kevin Nolan, because Kevin Nolan basically was that man in front of the goalkeeper, wasn't he?
Yeah,
and he just stood there with his elbow, and he, sorry, But he's given that role to Antonio because he's like stocky. It's really hard for the goalkeeper to get past him, and we just seem to be a bit more nasty, and then like corners itself, we never really scored a lot of, particularly in the modern era, from goals from corners, and with Souček and stuff, it just seemed to be a bit more direct, doing long throw-ons and stuff like that, and I don't mind that, to be honest.
I think being a bit more functional and kind of utilising the tools that you have at your disposal, like Souček seems to be. Like that Chelsea game. Chelsea are a funny team. Fantastic going forward, but it's like Lampard just doesn't fancy doing any defensive work at all. And they've also got that terrible goalkeeper where they would be better off just sticking like a balloon animal in goal rather than Kepa is absolutely abysmal. But then you watch that game and you're thinking, well, now we finally have a kind of a structure to our play that can take advantage of a team who are not kind of able to cope with that. And Souček obviously scored one goal, had another one ludicrously ruled out because someone was laying on the floor, all that kind of stuff. So look, I agree with you. I think a bit of kind of, as I said, unsexy scrapping is not it's not a bad thing.
Totally, just to mix it up. Funny, I mean, that was funny, that Chelsea game, because part of the Premier League directive is I have to play goal music, and so I had it all lined up.
You're to blame for this.
Yeah, well, it's not me, but it's not literally. I've been this is my 19th season doing it, something like that, and I've never played goal music in 19 years doing it. But it was a directive from the Premier League. They also wanted originally music for VAR decisions, and I was like, and I originally pitched the countdown theme tune, but they didn't like that, so we didn't do it. But yeah, so this goal music, so we had it all lined up, and obviously the first time was the disallowed goal. And I was like, well, that's it. I told you. That's why we didn't have it, because then I'm a fucking idiot. And luckily, you made up for it later on. But yeah, no, it's weird. Yeah, we can't. They always want goal beat us, and hopefully we don't do it once everyone gets back into the ground. But because I'm very much against it. It's very Americanized. I don't like it.
Would agree with you.
But I quite like the. I was watching the NBA the other day, and they got some cool stuff with all the Zoom wall of fans, proper. I know we pissed about it when it was alleged, when Nigel Kearns said we were going to do it as a joke, and everyone it got on the telly, in the newspapers. But it works really well. And I was watching some wrestling the other day, and they've done it as well, and it looks really good. It was quite nice, but because you had there, and League of Their Own had it as well. They had it on the telly. They had people watching the audience, and at least you had a bit of atmosphere, direct atmosphere, not someone playing FIFA.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of been interesting. I've watched the games without the crowd noise on, because I actually think it's quite interesting to hear the players yelling. To basically to hear Moyes spend 90 minutes yelling Felipe, but in the game against Wolves was the only thing that was distracting me from how badly we were playing. But I think to me it's quite interesting to hear how much professional footballers talk to each other, and I think it's also quite interesting to watch games played. I think without so much emotion. Actually, I think footballers are playing in a more sort of, I don't know if calculated is quite the right word, but they're playing in a different way than they would do. And it's just interesting when you watch, because you watch a game sometimes and you think, God, that foul there, if that was 60,000 in the stadium or however many in the stadium, and it was an away player making that, 100% they're getting a yellow card for that.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. And so you saw, I think, actually referees letting the game flow more. I know VAR is in a difficult period of its existence, shall we say. But I felt like actually sort of generally officiating absent VAR was quite good. And actually, I quite enjoyed watching players play without the pressure of fans demanding that they make pointless 20-yard runs to close down players who don't need closing down, or whatever it might be. And to me, it was just interesting to watch a different type of football. And again, we don't know when fans are going to be back in the stadium, so it'll be again just kind of fascinating to see that as it kind of unravels over the upcoming season.
And the other thing I'm worried about, because actually we playing quite well when there's no fans. The adverse effect is we'll play really, really well, and then the fans will come in and they'll just go and they'll freeze and they'll be crap for the rest of the season, because and that's the trouble. That's the West Ham way, isn't it, Jim? You just can't. West Ham never worked with the hand they're dealt with.
Well, I mean, I definitely think there's something to be said for. I imagine if you're a West Ham player, not having that sense of negativity that can roll around our stadium from time to time, and sometimes it manifests itself in booing, but it's even just sometimes that a misplaced pass here, or a fluff shot, or a substitution comes on that the fans don't agree with, and all of a sudden it's just like a little kind of wave that goes all the way around the stadium, and then everyone knows that the fans don't want that guy to be taken off and that guy to be brought on. So all of that was kind of absent in that end of season. And actually, I just thought it was interesting to. I couldn't say whether it made us play better or worse, and frankly, I think that's probably more down to just what Moyes was doing in terms of how he structured them. But just interesting to see how it was different.
Yeah, no, I know exactly how you feel, and exactly, it was interesting. I just think, I mean, it's one of those things where you never know until the hand you get dealt with. So we maybe we we're playing well, and the fans will give us that give them the extra 10%. So they do run the extra 5 yards and put it in a bit. I mean, the fact is, everyone can see the game a lot better than they did at the stadium. It's on telly all the time, so they get all the camera angles and they get the replays, and they don't have to queue up for a wee at half time. And so I know it's there is something to be said about, and I love it because I got a car park space at the stadium. I've never done that. I'm home in 20 minutes, so it's great for me. But we'll see what happens. Now, the question I always ask everyone, Jim, he says 20 minutes into the video, the first question is why is West Ham your club?
And I think my answer probably would be similar to lots of other people, which is just I'm local. I was born to a West Ham family. It's a little bit odd actually, because my family, probably like a lot of others, were sort of an immigrant family. So that's an Irish immigrant family who came to the East End, and my grandfather worked at Ford's. My uncles and various other family members were there. But interestingly, then some of the family went back to Ireland. And funny enough, I think the drive to be a West Ham family actually came more from the Irish guys. So they kind of went back to Dublin. I presume everyone in the 70s and 80s was supporting Liverpool and Leeds and Man United and so on. And I think there was something sort of special about being a West Ham fan. And so, when I was born, into the family, we were a West Ham family, but it was an Irish thing that was driven by the Irish element of the family. And then, I think my dad was a football fan, but it wasn't something his dad had taken him to.
Yeah.
But I liked playing football. I got into playing football as a kid, and then, he took me to my first ever game. West Ham lost 4-0 at Leicester. They had Smith and Lineker up front, to be fair. Yeah, exactly. I felt like it was a reasonable first game to take me to, in the sense that it set me up for quite, I knew what was coming. And then really the first ever home game was the Ipswich game in 1985-86, when Ray Stewart scored a very late penalty and we went second in the table. It was during that massive backlog of fixtures at the end of the season. And so I suppose at that point, as a sort of 6 or 7 year old, I thought, wow, not only are they my team, but they're brilliant. This is great. I'm setting myself up for a life of fun. And then, the story. We aren't brilliant. But I think once you're hooked, once you go, and myself and my cousin, we still go together. We have our season tickets together. And I think it is a family thing. I take my daughters, he takes his sons. Our dads took us. And hopefully it will pass on down through the generations. And it's not, you're not a West Ham fan for the success. No. You're a West Ham fan for something else. But it just felt like the right club, and it played team, whether they did or not, were always renowned for playing good football. They produced good young players. Yeah. They were, and it was kind of electric, going to Upton Park, particularly in midweek. For midweek games, I started going in the early 90s, and I think that football going experience was unparalleled, really. And for a young kid, it was just amazing. And that was just to watch us play, Bournemouth at home on a Wednesday night. It wasn't
exactly,
It wasn't particularly glamorous football. So I guess sort of family is the real answer.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, everyone has that. Yeah, everyone has a sort of the genre of origin stories can be like 3 or 4 different. But it's the subplots, as you said. Yeah, it was a family, but then the whole Irish connection, and they sort of embellish, like put the layer on top in terms of how you're going to be a West Ham fan. And obviously, once you're in, you said you're in, and then it's too late for any daughters or sons. Sorry, Flo, but yeah.
That is right. I mean, I remember my sister very briefly experimented with being a Spurs fan, primarily to wind me up. But she's a huge West Ham fan as well, and I mean, it is. I mean, even now my kids are like, "Why do we have to be West Ham fans?" It's like, I'm afraid you are. It's just you just are.
Just are. I mean, exactly. I mean, I got the same as my. Although I did go to we always go. It's funny every time we're in Lakeside or whatever. My daughter's like, because she knows it'll make me happy. She always should we go to the West Ham shop, Daddy? I was like, yeah, let's go and have a look at the West Ham shop. And and then obviously it was 20% off the weekend, so she was like, oh, there's a new kit. I love that. Yep, 20% off. Yeah, good girl.
Nice.
Good girl. She knows it makes me happy. But now, and she's, I mean, we live in Hornchurch, so we're relatively close. We were close, obviously. No, they moved to Dagenham at Redbridge now, they the women's game. So she used to go Rush Green quite a lot, and she really enjoyed it. She really didn't really give a shit about West Ham, about football. And then I don't know whether it's people at school and kids. Oh, my daddy works at West Ham, well, you know. And then she started getting into it a little bit more. So maybe this season I might take it to. I might get my wife to take it, but yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. I'm a season ticket holder for the women's team. I live in Hornchurch too, actually, so I'm not very far away from the ground. And my daughters are much more willing to come to watch the women's team than they are watch the men's team. And I think there's something in that just generally about the ease of driving 5 minutes up the road. But I
get
think
car park space.
You get car park space. That is very true. But I think, to be fair, not to downplay it, I think it is also very important for young girls to see people
definitely.
like them playing football. And I remember my oldest. My middle, I've got 3 daughters. My middle daughter plays football, and I remember watching the very first West Ham game I took her to. Rosie Kmita was playing, and she was just like, I've never seen anyone play football who has hair like me. And of course, as a bloke, this is not something that ever crosses your mind, but actually it's really, really important for young girls. And then with them getting to the FA Cup final, hopefully, I mean, I coach my daughter's team, so I'm a little bit familiar with the girls' game in Essex. There are hundreds of really talented girls out there, fantastic players, and hopefully, in a few years' time, West Ham should be a really, really strong women's team as well.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it was like my daughter we took her friends. She's got twins friends, and it was like, and also it cost me like £6 for us to get in. I think that because it was like a family ticket. It was like, I could have got in myself and it was a tenner or something like that. Or as a family, it cost us a £5, and then we had to buy another kid for £1. It was brilliant, great fun. I loved it because I never get a chance to watch football like properly. I'm stuck in that box, and I've been for so many years that I just sort of not. It's really weird. I don't shout at the referees because I'm not in the, I'm in a little box on my own, really. Who's going to listen to me? So I was proper on, shouting at the referee that my wife's saying, Russ, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know. It's just like this whole sort of hooligan thug came over me. So embarrassed, but no, it's all good stuff. And as you said, it's one of those things. Once you're in, aren't they? And you're never going to get out. And you said it's not about the football. It's about the fact is, as you said, you go with your family, your cousin, and their kids, and that's what it's all about. I think that really, this sort of whole behind closed doors football has really exemplified the fact that it's the fans that make football. They just do. It just do. And it's you could have it. When I go and watch, obviously I'm one of the 300 there. It's weird, but you just don't get no connection. Just don't get no connection with it because you don't hear the fans. You don't hear. I have to literally put the crowd noise on the telly through my iPad just because otherwise it's just death. All I can hear is the tapping of like journalists' computers.
Yeah. It's like a reserve game.
Well, like the under 23s. God, yeah. But even that was like 200, and they were all like their friends and family. So it's a little bit more, a bit of a reaction. Bless them. And we still do all the video. I don't know why we still do all the videos. And it's like who for? There's no one here. Literally for my own benefit, I'm watching it. Anyway, moving on. So let's go on to the 11. Let's go on to the Hammers 11 now. Obviously, everyone that comes on, we ask them to pick their 11. So it's their 11. They can do whatever they want with it. The only rule is they have to be alive to have seen them play. Now, I believe you were mentioning you may have put some self-imposed rules on who you pick in your 11. Is that correct?
I did. So I decided to also implement a rule that. I guess there's a couple of rules, but they're sort of similar. But essentially, what I'm saying is. To myself, when you think of this player, you need to think of them as a West Ham player. So as an example, I think if you were going to pick any West Ham 11 of the greatest players ever, you probably should have someone like Liam Brady or Paulo Futre or even Teddy Sheringham. Would be fantastic, world-class players. Yeah. But I guess my point is we got them, all of them, at the end of their careers.
Yes.
When still fantastic players, but in particular like Paulo Futre, you couldn't have him in there. So I guess I've sort of said if you don't think of them as a West Ham player, then you can't have them. And similarly, if I saw them but they weren't in their prime, then I've not chosen them either. So as an example, I think I said to you, I kind of started watching mid-80s, but I really started going properly home and away in like 1991. So I would have seen players like Phil Parkes or Alan Devonshire or Alvin Martin, who would have definitely been in this team. But I'm kind of saying the version of those players that I saw, I'm not picking.
Yeah.
The unfortunate problem with that is that it also ruled out all of our.
We've had fuck all. We've had fuck all people in their prime.
Yeah. So my greatest team is getting relegated, but you know, them's the. I mean, in the end,
the rules.
But yeah, in the end, quite a lot of good attacking players, no defenders. That feels to me like quite a good microcosm of supporting West Ham. So I feel like actually a lot of fans will empathise with this team, even though they would never have picked it. So
you're right, because we literally always, bar probably hopefully 11 at least, we always bookends. We get people at the bookends of their career. Some people either side, you know, Joe Cole was either side of the bookend before he went. Yeah, but still, it's like we never really have. There's probably only a handful, maybe 11 occasions where we've had someone who have actually been in their prime. So I'm looking forward to this. All right, we'll start off in goal.
Okay, so in goal, I've chosen Ludek McCloskey.
Yes.
First goalkeeper I ever saw, you know, play for West Ham, really consistency, and actually. A lot of fans, I think he's one of those players who I think if you remember him at the end of his career when he was a bit error prone, there's probably like a whole load of fans who might be watching this game. He's talking about the same bloke as I remember watching. But McCloskey in his prime was really, you know, a fantastic goalkeeper. And he that season that I kind of mentioned a few times now, that 1990 season when we got promoted. We I think went unbeaten 20 games or something to start the season, and McCloskey kept like 12 clean sheets or something. You know, and what he, I think more than any other goalkeeper of the era that I've watched West Ham, he was capable of producing these sort of one-off performances, and the very famous one obviously is the Man United one to deny them the league. But he did that quite a lot of times where he just was absolutely incredible, and it was just sort of, you know, you shall not pass. And you know, he would keep the score down to 3-1 or something, you know. But like, he was a fantastic keeper in his prime. And I mean, I do think Fabianski is a tremendous goalkeeper, and I did give him some thought. But McCloskey to me was a sort of defining goalkeeper of my time watching West Ham.
No, I agree there. And you're right, but Fabianski's that 35, 36 now, isn't he? So, and I wouldn't say his prime was probably that first couple of seasons at Swansea. He was definitely his prime.
Yes, and you're right. Actually, I mean, does he even fit my criteria? Possibly not. But yeah, as you said, there may only be 11 people who fit my criteria. So we shall see. But Ludo in goal.
Ludo in goal. You go through the team because I know you've got it all written down, Jim. So you go through it as you want to.
Well, this is so the coach in me has also tried to sort of actually figure out a way to get this team to play. We shall see. So anyway, right back would be Lucas Neal.
Yeah.
Who. I mean, it's funny when I thought back over the period that I've watched West Ham. You know, Tim Breaker played for a long time as a West Ham player. I mean, again, there is an argument that you wouldn't think of Lucas Neal as a West Ham player, but I kind of think he was pretty significant for us when he played. Yes. So I'm going to take liberties with my own rules, 2 players in, and say that I'm having him. And it's funny. I saw you did one of these with Gio from Ham's Chat, and I think you know, I feel we have quite a similar team actually. But he mentioned that the impact that Neal had on and off the pitch seemed to me very significant. And I don't really put any stock particularly in the notion that a captain is particularly important to football teams. But Neal, to me, actually was. I felt like he sort of changed a bit of the mindset coming out of that Pardew era. And there was as you say, Kirbishley came in. And I just felt it was actually quite an underrated player for us. He was a really good player.
Totally. We had Anton on the channel a few weeks ago, and I mean, he was like waxing lyrically about the impact of Lucas Neal on his football career and his life in general.
Really?
And I was like, really? And then he spoke about it, and he spoke about, you know, they had a team meeting where Lucas Neal basically said they were training one day at the ground. And he goes, right, come on over upstairs. We go to a team meeting upstairs, and all the players went up, and then Curbs and Mervyn Day turn up. And he shut the door in their face. Went, no. And he basically said in his gravelly Australian accent, you know, if you don't want to fucking play here, tell me now and I'll get the boss to get rid of you. You know, we're in this together and we've got to sort ourselves out. And basically Anton went, it scared me shitless and I wanted to play. And it's like, and then he also apparently, and you talk about the effect on a club. He apparently was one of the first captains that Anton can remember who insisted that he'd actually go around collecting a percentage of all the players' win bonuses to give to the ground staff and the tea lady and the kit man. And just to say, thank you. If they were doing that and they weren't getting paid, could you imagine if they were getting paid a bit extra? They might, press your socks a bit better, and stuff like that. But I was stuff like that. Really didn't think about Lucas Neal in that light, but it really sort of opened my eyes to him.
Yeah, and I think he reminds me a little bit. What you're talking about there reminds me a bit of Kevin Nolan as well. That kind of pro, like I know it sounds ridiculous, but like an actual professional who's come in and he's going to do things properly. And I think part of the problem with Sam actually, and I suspect you'll find this a lot as you do these teams, and obviously you've done a large number of them. We've got tons of these sort of players who arrive at West Ham and they're there because there's sort of something wrong with them, and they're absolutely brilliant players, but they wouldn't if there wasn't something wrong with their mentality, they would have been at much bigger clubs. And all of our sort of icons of the modern era are like that. And we love those players. I mean, I've got a friend of mine who just says, like, on out with it, he's an absolute West Ham player. He's like mad. So but he's brilliant. He should, of course, be a West Ham player. And I think there's something about that which means that we romanticize those sorts of players and don't properly value people like Lucas Neal and Kevin Nolan and other just sort of genuine pros.
Totally. And what's really interesting, I don't think it's just also in terms of captain position and the way people play, is you've got people who haven't appeared in any fans 11, but they appear in almost every player's 11 of that era. Sort of not the unsung heroes, but basically pretty much the people who played like defensive midfielder. So it was always, I think it was in Martin Allen's, in a few others, always Pete Butler was in all of them.
Right.
In the sort of mid 2000s, always Hayden Mullins was in everyone's 11.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, I think when I interviewed Luke Chadwick, he put him right back just to get him in the team. It's like, really? And it's like, then you go, actually, I can see why, because they were proper professionals and people respected them for what they did within the team in terms of the best. They weren't the fancy Dans. They weren't the guys, scoring 20 goals, or as if 20 goals a season, but 10 goals a season would be nice. But they would be doing the hard graft and stuff. And particularly Pete Butler. I mean, he was the first player I ever met. I have a soft spot for Pete Butler because he's also Liberia national manager.
Yes, he is, you're right, yeah.
And when I interviewed him, he was like dialing in from the compound, George Weir's compound. It was absolutely mental. So weird, but I love him. He was such a nice bloke, and he texts me all the time now. It's like, he's so sweet. I love it. Right, okay, Lucas Neal's in. Who's next, man?
So left back is, I think, unsurprising. If any fan of my era is probably going to pick Julian Dix, and he is, I think, the best left back that we've had. I mean, I don't think I can probably say very much about him that others haven't said. But he was, to me as a kid growing up, he was my hero. One of my heroes at West Ham. I think what I would say about him, I think a lot of fans again kind of idolise the sort of the passion thing and all that, which is fine, but I actually think he was just a very skillful player, and I don't think there were very many. There aren't very many fullbacks who I've watched can sort of control a game from their position. And Leighton Baines was one. I kind of remember watching him a few years ago play for Everton and thinking, wow, this guy, the best player on the pitch, and he's playing at left back. And I feel like there were times when Dix did that for us, and just that ability to distribute the ball, to defend. He could obviously take free kicks and penalties. He could win headers from corners. I just think he was an outstanding player, and I think with him and Neil, I think we'd be quite solid down the flank. So that's why
you're totally right. You're totally right about Julian. It's like it's not the most glamorous position, left back, but he and whether it was a bit of skill or maybe one of his tackles, he would galvanise a crowd in Upton Park from left back and dictate the game as well from left back as well. And but he was an incredibly skillful player. I remember someone picked it up, mentioned it, and I actually went back and looked at YouTube at the time where he always used to do it where the ball was going over his head, he'd always dink it back over the winger when they came. He did it once on Cantona, again in that Man United game, and he did it, and Cantona just nodded like, and that's it. You get a nod from Eric Cantona, you are a good player. You know, there's no two ways about it. But
I remember he played once. We played away at Sunderland on Sky Super Sunday, as it was incorrectly known, because it finished 0-0. This game, it was absolutely abysmal. And I remember reading a story afterwards where Dick's one player of this was in a day when people could ring in and vote for the player of the match, and he won he won it and got the bottle of champagne. And apparently off camera, he said to the guy, like the Jeff Shreves equivalent, I can't believe anyone voted in. And apparently the bloke said to him, well, only 6 people rang in. And what made me laugh was I'd rung in twice to vote for Dick. So I never really knew if that was apocryphal or not, but it was just a genuinely skillful player. And even that was a particularly awful game, and he stood out just because he had that bit of class, really. And I think that gets a bit forgotten in the sort of the red card and the blood and thunder tackles.
Totally.
But he was a very, very good player.
A funny story about man of the matches. I remember when Ian Wright was playing for West Ham, he'd win man of the match every week. Even like he'd be on for 10 minutes because obviously the people that voted for man of the match then met the man of the match.
Yes.
And so it was like Ian Wright. He had barely kicked the ball, but he was man of the match. But I totally agree. And obviously he's a dad again, isn't he, Julian? He had a kid the other day. So that's exactly what you need when you're putting together a battle plan to stay up in the Premier League. Is another kid.
Yeah, he's a better man than me.
Taking that exactly, on. But 50, 53 as well now. So it's like same birthday as Phil Parks. There we go. Julian's in. Who's next then, Jim?
So centre back, I've gone. My first centre back is Steve Potts. I just, to be honest, so when I played football, certainly when I was a kid, I was a kind of small centre back, sort of a sweeper type player. So Potts was an obvious sort of player to try and emulate. Really quick, read the game really well. And he also played in an era, actually, where there were a lot of sort of little and large striking partnerships. So there was lots of sort of hit the big man and then you got the small guy alongside him. And so, he would often be paired up with Bilic or Reaper or whoever and be the small guy marking the very quick, or marking Peter Beardsley or whoever it would be. So again, I probably underrated, I think, certainly by fans outside of West Ham, actually. I think if you said Steve Potts to pick, I think they'd just be on who. But 600 performances or 600 appearances, for a team that's in the top 2 divisions of the country, shows that you're a pretty good player. And he's still at the club, I think, in the academy.
Under 23s, under 23s coach. And I suppose, when you look at the people in their prime, if they played their whole career at West Ham, they would have fit their prime sometime. So
yes, quite.
There you go. And, good idea.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and so what you're going to find now is I've got about 4 names written down for his partner because the obvious choice is Rio Ferdinand, but I ruled him out. I also had Tony Gale down, but I kind of ruled him out as well because he wasn't really in his prime when I started watching. So actually, in the end, I had a really hard choice between 2 players who played in the same team. I thought Danny Gabardon was an outstanding player, but he was injured quite a bit with us. He probably only had 1 good season. Yeah. So I've actually gone with Anton Ferdinand as Potts' partner. I just think, again, he was a very classy player, Ferdinand.
He was.
And it took a little while to sort of get to the level of ability that he in the end demonstrated, and certainly his first couple of seasons he was a bit hit and miss. But towards the end of that period, just before we got promoted, I thought he was a bit of a Rolls Royce defender in the championship, as was just a cut above. And then when we went up, particularly in that first season, I thought he was outstanding. And I always felt it was a bit of a shame, really, that his career kind of tailed off. I mean, if you end up playing for Sunderland, you've essentially given up playing professional football. So, it was very disappointing, I think, on a personal level for him that he ended up where he did, because I felt like he actually had a bit more to give than that. But I think it always seemed to me like maybe some of that off the pitch stuff around the end of the Pardew era, affected him. And so I don't think he ever quite delivered on his potential, but when he was good, I thought he was a very good player.
Yeah, I mean, him and Elliott all together as a partnership were really, great in the championship, weren't they? And he was a great defender. He scored that goal against Fulham, weren't it? And he was Premier League Man of the Month like in the first season, which was the only. Go on.
Yeah, sorry. What I was going to say, I mean, he played. I mean, if you think we had Gabidon and we had Collins, it was Ferdinand was the guy who played, and it was the other two, who rotated around him. And Gabidon played a bit more, I think, than Collins. But I think Ferdinand was, he was quick. He could play, and he probably suffered a bit in comparison to his brother, but he was a good player if you assessed him as a player on his own. So,
yeah, totally. And I think him and his brother were the first brother pairing to ever win the Premier League Player of the Month. He was telling, it was all his stats. He was reading off. I think there was only something like there'd been like 14 player man of the match like months who were defenders or something like that, and it's just crazy at the time. But and obviously he was part of that relatively successful FA Cup final team as well, and obviously got promoted with us, and he loves the club. Still loves the club, and I love players who leave and they still love West Ham. And
it's quite nice, isn't it? When you
it's lovely.
That,
It's lovely when you feel that when you hear what they say. And also, he spoke about something I didn't realise. I didn't really think about was the pressure on players when it comes to the playoff finals. So obviously, he was like, because I know I've been, when I went with my brother, people know me since I was 12, and they're still there, the tea ladies, and I'm thinking, shit, if we don't win this game, they're out and they're here. He's like, I can imagine a lot of people don't give a shit, but for people like him, it was really refreshing for him to say that.
Yeah, and obviously that's quite nice because I hear a lot of fans. I don't know, you hear a lot of fans say, "Oh, we need to go down. We need to go down so we can reset. It would be the best thing ever, and we would come out and all this." And I always think to myself, well, but there's a human cost to that, which is exactly as you say. People lose their jobs. The company as is. Suddenly start. The profits nosedive by like 80%. There's like a real cost to that, and I think it's quite nice that you're saying that he would be an example of someone who's a bit more human about it.
And he was really open about the pressures of having his brother as his brother. And I didn't talk about that because I thought I wasn't going to talk about that. But he brought it up. He was like, "Yeah, it was really hard. I struggled. I really struggled." And then, like, I think it was Joe Cole, like, they all started putting their arm around him when he started getting into the training sessions at the first team. And then he felt a little bit like he wasn't standing on Rio's coattails all the time. Because that must have been really hard.
Yeah.
Same position as well, and but anyway, Anton's in. Who's next, man?
So I don't know if you have any restrictions on formation.
Nope.
I'm playing. Okay, all right. So I'm playing 4-2-3-1. So I've got two holding midfield or two deep in midfield. So the first one is Scott Parker, who I know a lot of fans have a bit of a funny relationship with Parker because I think that's primarily because he ended up at Spurs. But if we took that position with every single one of our players who left and went to a rival, we wouldn't like anyone. So an outstanding player during his time here, and I think he meets my criteria. Where I think if you ask most non-West Ham fans about who did he play for, I think they'd say, well, I remember him at West Ham. He won the Player of the Year in a team that went down. A really like a high class player, and probably another one of those examples of a player who was probably a bit more professional than the environment that he ended up playing in. But really just liked him as a player. Felt. What the biggest shame I think of his West Ham career was probably Thomas Hitzelsberger getting injured when we signed him that year that we went down, because Hitzelsberger was a really high class player, and he unfortunately got injured and we got relegated, so we lost him. But having him for a few years alongside Parker would have made a big difference. But just generally, again, another very good player.
I agree, I'm very similar to you. It winds me up. When something like Parker, in the modern era, he, as you said, how many years? 3 years in a row on Football Writers Player of the Season. The season went down. That's never happened. And he carried West Ham for 3 years on his back. He would crawl off that pitch, and because he went and played for a club because he didn't want to leave London. His dad supported Spurs, so he wanted to go. I think his dad had passed.
Yeah.
It's just But then people forget about other things. They forget about Martin Peters, and they forget about Bobby Moore wanting to go to Tottenham. That's all like what? It's all being shoved aside.
And now they all want him to become managers because he's had a successful time at
Fulham. Exactly.
Football fans are not terribly rational beings, to be honest. So I'd like to think that he still retains a fondness for the club, but I've no idea. But an excellent player.
Yeah, definitely. Right, Parkinson. Who else have we got in that defensive?
Alongside him, I mean, ultimately you've got Carrick, Frank Lampard. Either of those two could have gone in. The best central midfielder I've ever seen play for us is actually Alex Song, but he doesn't meet my criteria either. So I've robbed myself of him. So the other player that I'm going to play alongside him is Manuel Lanzini, who I've always felt is better deeper. Anyway, I know lots of fans probably think of him as a number 10, but to me, the kind of identikit Lanzini performance was the Spurs game in the League Cup, I can't remember, Carabao, whatever it was, when we were 2-0 down at half-time at Wembley. And the second half, Lanzini just came alive and we came back to win it 3-2, which I'm sure most West Ham fans will remember. And just, his ability to get on the ball, his ability to do things, his ability to retain possession in difficult circumstances. It's just a fantastic player, Lanzini. And it's such a shame that he's got this injury, because I'm not completely sure he's going to come back from that, because it looks a bad one. It was a bad one, definitely. But it looks like it's he's struggling to come back from it. And he obviously just got himself into the Argentina team to play alongside Messi and all the rest of them at the World Cup. So, again, I think there's sort of an outside validation of how good a player he is or was, because Argentina are going to give him that role when they've got a million, outstanding central midfielders. But I just think a brilliant little player. And for me, as much as I like Mark Noble and Ian Bishop, Lanzini for me would be the player in that position.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's just, it's a shame. And I think obviously he was in his prime, I think, when we signed him, and then because of injuries, he'll never be that level again. You know what I mean? It is a shame, because there is a player in there. I remember when Mr. Pyatt was in the team and Lanzini, and I remember one of the video guys, they were recording free kicks, and Lanzini his free kick accuracy was like 30% better than Pyatt's, and it's he never get a chance to kick it, because it was always Pyatt's ball, and you could still think there was a player in there, and he's got a lovely apartment now, over the Canary Wharf. Yeah, he's an Instagram, kick ball outside his dog, and I'd love to. I mean, I think it's a shame how it's worked, how it's happened, recently. But you would think the way the team is set up now, a fit again Lanzini would be brilliant in that three in midfield with Souček.
Would be the best signing we could make. Would be getting Lanzini back fit again. I mean, if they can do that, if that kind of what we saw at the end of last season was just a bit of rust, and actually Lanzini can get back to the level he was at, I'd feel a lot more confident about our chances in the upcoming season. So we'll have to see. But to me, just a great player.
Sure. All right, Lanzini's in. Who's next, Jim?
So wide right, Trevor Sinclair, one of my favourite all-time players. Pace, skill, great finisher, selfless team player. Played either side, played as a wing back at various times. I think one of the most gratifying things that I think I've seen as a fan was Sinclair getting into the World Cup squad in 2002.
Agreed.
For a guy who played like 8 times for England or something, to have managed to have got 5 of them in a World Cup, culminating in a quarter final against Brazil. That was so. And you can't get too invested in footballers, but I kind of felt like almost a personal connection. I wanted him to do well. I really wanted to. I was kind of proud of him in a way that I hadn't ever really felt about a West Ham or a player before, a West Ham player before, because I just felt whenever I watched him play for West Ham that he was a proper professional, and he would do everything that you wanted, or everything that you thought you would do if you ever got the chance to play for West Ham. So he ran as much as he could. He tracked back. He put in the yards. He scored brilliant goals. And I just, I write a blog called the H List, and I wrote an article about Trevor Sinclair, a kind of retrospective piece about him, because he was actually one of the players that moved us from being that sort of bottom of the table or bottom quarter of the table team, kind of at the mid to late 90s, to being that team that finished fifth in 98, 98, that crazy, batshit crazy team that finished fifth with a negative goal difference, lose 6-0 away from home, beat absolutely everybody at home. Sinclair was a prime part of that team. And I always really liked him. I think he's probably you can tell, I think he's probably my favourite player in this team that I've chosen. And even now, I think back very fondly on Trevor Sinclair's West Ham career.
Totally the same, Jim. I'm still a fanboy, and he still talks really highly of the club and interacts with people on Twitter and stuff like that. And he's just a nice guy. He's a nice guy, and I think clearly enjoyed his time at West Ham. And it was an absolute masterstroke by Harry to get him in. And for what was it, like Breaker and Roland and a couple of million or something like that. Mental.
Yeah. Absolutely fleeced them, and it's just, if you're going to do like the top 10 greatest signings in West Ham's history, you probably got Devonshire for $5,000, and then Sinclair's got to be in there somewhere, isn't that?
Definitely
an incredible signing. And as you say, actually, he messaged me on Twitter after I wrote that article about him, and like a 12-year-old boy, I was just,
it's true, isn't it? It's not
telling
like
my wife.
It's true. It's not like it's weird. Like in his modern era, particularly now more than ever, you don't really get autographs and selfies and things like that. It's all about a follow or a retweet or a like. So it's like Trevor. I mean, we'll put Trevor on the. He'll always retweet on when he appears in them.
Oh,
He's
nice,
never. He hasn't bloody been on them yet. Then he likes my tweets when I say when you're coming on. It's like, do you have a bot? Is this a bot? Here and it says Trevor Sinclair. He automatically likes, but same as Ian Bishop. Bish will retweet anything you say. Anything that's good about him, he'll retweet it, and I love it. And Macca and all that lot.
He sent me a couple of messages as well, because I wrote 3 of those articles. There was one about Sinclair, one about Bishop, and one about Jack Collison, and they all messaged me.
All good boys.
Like a 12-year-old. The 12-year-old in me again was just like, ringing up my dad, telling him, Ian Bishop just wrote me a message, and we were both thrilled because he was my dad's favourite player. So Sinclair. I probably, even though I don't think he was ever captain for West Ham, I probably made him captain in this team.
Sounds good. All right, he's on the wide right. Who's next then, Jim?
So wide left, I've gone with Dimitri Payet. I know a lot of fans probably. I think actually a lot of fans probably are past their feelings about Payet now. I think, and just look back on it with a sense of wonder, really, that we had a player this good in our club. And it was only sort of 50 games or 60 games or whatever it was, but what a 50 games he had. And I remember I took my daughters actually to an away game at Blackburn in the Cup. We won 5-1.
Oh, that game! Wow.
I took them up there. West Ham had like 7,000 fans there. They were quite young. In retrospect, probably too young to go, but nonetheless. And they were kind of standing on the seats next to me, and the crowd were going bonkers. And Payet scored 2 brilliant goals. One was a free kick, and one was a dribble.
Awesome.
And I just kind of remember sort of they were too young really, but I kind of walked away from the ground thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I was able to take my kids to watch a player that kind of virtuoso playing for us. And Gio mentioned this on his one as well. There was a game where we drew 2-2 with Manchester City in that final season at the Boleyn, which is the same season. And Payet was just comfortably the best player on the pitch, in a game that featured Aguero, Silva, prime Yaya Toure, just like unbelievable players everywhere you looked. And Payet was a head and shoulders above all of them. He was a brilliant player and brilliant for us. And irrespective of the kind of the circumstances around his departure, I think I'll always be grateful that we had that. Certainly that last season at the Boleyn, we had a player that good turning out for us. Even now, it kind of blows my mind.
I mean, we wouldn't have had that season, would we? That season wouldn't have been as great as it was without him. And I've mentioned it before when Payet's come up. It was the first time I can ever remember, and even still now, that all my non-West Ham mates wanted one of my players in their team. He was the man. He was like the guy in the Premier League that everyone wanted. And Tottenham fans or Arsenal fans, all the players they've had, and they were like pissing and shitting themselves when we played them because of Dimitri Payet. And I don't ever remember that happening. Yeah, you might have it occasionally. Antonio's in a bit of form at the moment, so yeah, but it was every game, and he just did it from day one. I remember that shit at Southend friendly, and he was just awesome. And then, when we played Arsenal, a lot of particularly foreign players need a couple of games to get into the swing of.
Yeah.
No, Rabonas, the little 360s he did, and he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant player. No, I loved him. The technically the best player I've ever seen at West Ham. I think that's fair. I mean, we haven't had a Ballon d'Or nominee since, or before.
Or before, yeah, yes, yeah. Agree.
I think Jonathan Spector got close one year, if I remember.
Yeah, quite probably.
Good old Johnny. Yeah. Right, Payet's in. Who's next?
So my number 10 is, this one's borderline as to whether or not you'll accept it under my ridiculous terms, but I've gone with Joe Cole. Because I feel like people associate Joe Cole with West Ham.
I agree.
Possibly because he was a good player for Chelsea, but probably not a great player in the way that, say, Lampard was.
Yeah. And
then he went on to Liverpool, and then he sort of, he ended up with a quite sort of nomadic career, really. But he had two periods at West Ham. And the year that we went down, Joe Cole won Hammer of the Year and actually played central midfield all season long, and I thought was like outstandingly good in that role as a kind of box-to-box midfielder. And Mourinho got hold of him and turned him into something else. But really, whether he's a number 10, I'm not really sure. But I considered him. The guy who possibly could also be in this role is Berkovic, who I also strongly. He's on my subs bench if you allow me one. But Cole, I think, just again seemed to genuinely care, seemed to really value being a West Ham player, and he valued kind of his association with the club. And I'm kind of looking at my team and thinking, this team would let so many goals in, but going forward, you would pay your season ticket money to come and watch these guys, and so I put him in there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, his family is still West Ham, massive West Ham fans. He still speaks very highly of the club every time he's on commentary or analysis work. And he came back, and I think he had unfinished business at West Ham. And you're right, he went to Chelsea and they sort of ruined this beautiful football player who, if he was given a free role when the free role sort of disappeared in that sort of era, he would have been one of the greats. I really think so. I really think he had all the bits, but unfortunately he was put into a box which didn't fit him. It was, if he was like in around sort of, everyone talks about him in Gazza's era, but if he was around sort of, that era where Gazza was allowed to just go and play, at Tottenham, it wasn't a position. It was the proverbial free role. That's how I saw Joe Cole. I just think, you know what I mean?
Well, he's an interesting player because there's also, if you look now, there's a lot of kids coming through English academies and through the English system who are highly technical players who are incredibly skillful dribblers, and someone like Jadon Sancho would be a good example of that. Foden, another one. And a lot of that actually is that there's been a change to the way that the FA have coached in the last sort of few years. And I kind of know this just because I've gone through a couple of the courses and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's tons of stuff about, you stay on the ball, you learn to retain possession in difficult positions and you play out from there. And actually, so Joe Cole was slightly ahead of his time. And I think if Cole came through now, I don't think he'd be viewed with the suspicion that he was at the time. And he arrived to Redknapp, who was, of course, a very offensive attacking coach who paid very minimal attention to defensive work. So, of course, Cole actually he was a great coach for Joe Cole, but then ended up with Mourinho, who would, Mourinho would take Messi and have him track back. He would have defensive responsibility. So, Mourinho is, you could argue, was a great coach for Cole. I don't really know, because he gave him structure and he gave him discipline that he didn't have before. But I feel like if Cole kind of emerged into this era now, in particularly this sort of international era where you have an England team that's full of young technical players. Like I said, Sancho, Hudson, and Doyle, these various players around who are really skillful and kind of quite progressive. I feel like Cole now would be sort of held up on a pedestal in a way he wasn't when he arrived, because I think people viewed him a bit with suspicion, like, oh, he's going to be great, but he's going to try one too many lollipops and he'll give the ball away, and then we'll lose. So it's possibly a man out of his time. I don't know, but from my perspective, maybe it's a romantic pick, but I always sort of had a soft spot for Joe.
Yeah, no, I think everyone has a soft spot for Joe, don't they? So we'll put Joe in, and then who's the last piece of this puzzle?
So my striker who's going to bring all of this together is the most complete striker that I think West Ham have had in 30 years, which is Dean Ashton.
Yeah.
It's such a shame that he got injured, and in such a ludicrously West Ham way, where he gets called up for England, gets his ankle broken by the smallest man in the Western world playing professional football, Sean Wright-Phillips, and never recovers from it. Just such a shame. Because I thought Ashton had everything. I thought he could.
I agree.
Play in any way really, and hold the ball up. He could attack. He could finish. He could attack in multiple ways. Both feet, strong in the air. Just an outstanding player. Possibly it says a bit melodramatic, but he might be like one of the biggest regrets of the West Ham era of supporting West Ham is the demise of Dean Ashton.
No, definitely. He was the complete striker, wasn't he? Really. I've never seen anyone since, obviously, but he was, tall enough to compete in the air. He was big enough to hold it up. He had a turn of pace. It wasn't rapid, but he had a turn of pace to beat a defender. Skillful. Some of his goals were fantastic, and some of the way, obviously, I remember the bicycle kick, and obviously when he turned at the Middlesbrough, the semi-final, and he turned those, he was a brilliant player, and he would have been, he may have been West Ham, the West Ham team for many years. He may have buggered off to Man United to partner Rooney, but he would have done that for England. And
and I think he was. There's that old phrase about being a great goal scorer and a scorer of great goals, and I think Ashton fits that description. Because if you ever see any of Rob Banks' sort of clips that he posts up, or Vinnie Ryan, who posts a lot of stuff on Twitter, you sort of watch some of Ashton's goals, and of course, through the mist of time, as we'll get a bit older, you forget some of them, and you just kind of watch the skillfulness of his finishing, but also the variety of his finishes as well. He could score from a lot of different places on the pitch, and I think it's a real shame because they bought Craig Bellamy, who is another player I rated very highly, and I think they only played together in one game, which was that game we won at Reading 3-0, and then Ashton got injured, and I think those two together as a partnership, albeit I've got him up front on his own, but that's fine. I've got lots of attacking players to help him. That partnership could have been really strong because at the time Kirbysley was building quite a strong foundation behind him. So a great shame about what happened to Ashton, but still a very, very good player when he was here.
Yeah, he was. And who's on your bench? I know you mentioned it. We don't usually do the subs, but you can rattle through the subs.
All right, I'll quickly rattle through. So I've got Fabianski, but he contravenes my ranks. So I'm going to go Rob Green, Cresswell, Declan Rice, Ian Bishop, Isle Berkovic, Craig Bellamy, who also contravenes my rules really, and then Arnautovic, who I sort of have even though he was a bit bonkers, I quite liked Arnautovic. I thought he was a pretty good player.
He was a good player. Jim, man, it's been great. It's been fun. The time is an hour and 10 minutes almost. Fucking hell. Jesus, when people start talking about West Ham, they're just like, it goes from forever, doesn't it? I love it, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Not at all. Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
That's been lovely. Thank you. And obviously, thanks everyone for watching or listening, because we're on Spotify and Apple podcasts and things like that. Wherever you're on, whatever platform, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything else, and hit any notifications to make sure you're made aware of any time we put new content on. And obviously, for those of you around Thursday nights, make sure you're tuned into the live stream. Be good fun. And from me and Jim, take care, everyone. Stay safe. Come on, you irons, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Take care, everyone. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.